My presentation is on the shootings that took place at Kent State University in Ohio in 1970. In 1970, particularly May of 1970, there was a series of protests and demonstrations that had begun. These demonstrations had taken place because of orders on President Nixon to send troops into Cambodia. There was a lot of people that were really unhappy, and it affected a lot of people and a lot of families because they did not feel that these troops should be sent into Cambodia. So, at Kent State University, things started taking place. On May 1st, 1970, the first set of demonstrations that took place was a series of about 500 students who went ahead and took a copy of the Constitution and they buried it. They said that President Nixon had destroyed all of their American beliefs by what he was doing. So they buried the Constitution to try and prove a point. After that, the next thing that had happened over that weekend was a group of students decided to set fire to an ROTC building on campus. Not only did they set fire to the building, but they also went ahead and they cut all of the fire hoses so the firemen would not be able to set out the fires. So demonstrations were occurring all weekend long. When these students returned back to school on Monday, the National Guard had got there. The governor of Ohio called in the National Guard. 900 National Guardsmen were sent into Ohio. These guardsmen then went to Kent State University. So on Monday, when class resumed at Kent State University, the administration decided that there should be no protests, no demonstrations, nothing should be taking place that day. So students had a mind of their own and they held their own demonstration. They went into the University Commons. There was about 2,000 students who took part in this. They went to the University Commons and they all sat down in protest of the war on Cambodia. So, National Guard was there. National Guard troops had asked all the students to leave. They said no. They started getting angry, the students did, and they were throwing rocks and just being completely disrespectful to the National Guard. National Guard decided to use bayonets and tear gas to try and break up the crowds of people. They went through the crowds, tried breaking up the crowds. All it did was anger the students, and things got more escalated. So, National Guard decided to let shots out. So within a couple of minutes of rocks being thrown, shots were fired. 67 shots to be exact. And with those 67 shots, there was 4 students that were killed and 9 students that were injured that day. One of those students was Dean Kaler. Dean Kaler was actually a friend of my father's. Well, technically, it was my father's brother, so my uncle's good friend. Dean Kaler was paralyzed because of this incident. So we knew firsthand how it had affected these poor students at Kent State. My father actually remembers the day after the shootings, the school that he attended. He was in high school at the time, and other area high schools were protesting at between 12 and 12:30 that afternoon. They all sat out in they didn't sit out. They walked out. They all walked out of class at 12:30 to go onto the yard of the school to remember and honor the students that were shot and killed. It was a very sad time, and it affected a lot of people because Kent State University was a small school. It wasn't, a Yale or nothing big like that where students sought out to go. It was usually local high school students who frequented this college. So, National Guard went ahead and went on trial. There was a federal civil indictment put on these guardsmen, but really all the charges were dismissed and nothing ever came of it. But every year on May 1st, or May 4th, excuse me, students always remember the Kent State shootings. This is a reenactment of 14-year-old Marianne Vecchio screaming and kneeling over the body of 20-year-old Jeffrey Miller after he was shot down during the Kent State Massacre. Kent State photojournalism student John Paul Philo, who was just 22 years old at the time, captured this famous image and was later awarded the 1971 Pulitzer Prize for spot news photography. This is a copy of the original image that John Philo took that day on May 4th, 1970. And that concludes my presentation on the Kent State shootings.